17 years ago, I would have told myself, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I had been on it for months at a time and I got addicted to it. I just told the police, I said, you're either gonna kill me or I'm gonna kill you.
You want to just tell us who you are and really what's your story?
My name's Shawn Misener. I live here in Sturgis, Michigan, and I'm a recovering heroin addict. I did heroin for about 26 years of my life, and now I've been sober going on 17 years. My first counter with drugs was my mother and father partying, and after they had gone to sleep or passed out, whatever it was, I seen drugs laying on the living room table, and it was marijuana, and I seen cocaine and some other stuff. I didn't know exactly what it was till later on in life, and I gathered up a bunch of it, and then the next day with some friends we did those drugs.
Do you think marijuana is a gateway drug?
No, I don't believe it's a gateway drug. A lot of addicts do marijuana, but it's also well known to help people with different addictions, and it's helped people with their anxieties and depressions and everything like that. Really, my main message and really reason I wanted to do this was that addiction is out there, and there are millions of people that are addicted in your community, in this community. And there's ways of getting out of it. There's ways of getting away from the addiction. It's not easy. It's hard work. But it's very possible. I'm living the dream, I guess you can say. I'm living the dream sober right now.
So yeah, I mean, how did this kind of all really just start, Like, where did you go to school at? How was your environment, growing up?
I'm from Elkhart, Indiana. I was born and raised in Elkhart. And my father worked for the city street departments for many, many years, retired out. My mother was a blue-collar worker herself, worked in factories, restaurants, bartending, cooking, stuff like that. And I went to Pure Moran Middle School in Elkhart and wound up becoming athletic. Played football, track and field, stuff like that, and became really good at football. Playing football, I was a wide receiver for Pure Moran Middle School. Went on to play at Elkhart Central, wide receiver there. During my junior high school years, there at Pure Moran, I would hang out with other football players and athletes and kids in the school, and after football games or on the weekend, we would all get together at the lakes or the parks and people's houses and do what every 13, 14-year-old kids do. They play video games, they talk about girls and everything, and people were doing marijuana and people were doing cocaine, and I didn't really think nothing of it. Oh, I'm going to get addicted or anything like that. I just, fit in. You want to fit in with, the people that are there. You want to be friends with them. So you do the drugs. You do the marijuana. You do the cocaine. And I did that for years. Going into high school, did the same thing, played football, and did all those drugs as well. Doing the marijuana and the cocaine, stuff like that, was just, it was like an everyday thing. We would do the marijuana, we would do the cocaine, we would party and hang out and run the streets. And I sustained a sports injury in football, and doctors put me on pain medications at that time. And I was taking the drugs, the pain medications as prescribed. But then, they weren't really helping. I was still in pain. So I started taking more and more and more and wound up getting addicted to them. And the doctor knew I was addicted and just cut me off. I was like, you can't, I can't give you any more. I was going to him and asking for another refill. And well, where did the 20, 30, or 60 that I gave you go? You know, how did you did all of those already? And yeah, I did, you know, and the doctor just, you know, I can't give you no more. I wanted that drug. I wanted it because at that time, at that point, I had been on it for months at a time and I got addicted to it. I woke up in the mornings and the first thing I wanted to do was pop a few pills to get me going. And then, you know, I'm out of pills and then I go to the doctor and I ask the doctor for another refill. And because I'm starting to get upset stomach, headaches, you know, all the things that comes along with, you know, being an addict, needing that drug to, you know, ease that pain and ease that, you know, sickness. So I asked the doctor and he said no. And I didn't know what to do. I was addicted then. I wanted that drug. And I've pretty much done just about every drug you can probably think of. I've done the marijuana, the cocaine, the meth, the acids, the heroin, PCP, pretty much everything. I felt like I was something special. I could do things that I couldn't do. I could go and work for hours at a time, 12, 13 hours like it was nothing, and then go out and party that night with friends. And, you know, after working 12 hours, the normal person, you work 12 hours, you want to go home and rest.
Right.
I would 12 hours and then be doing them drugs and then go out and party all night with friends. And nowadays, with the economy and stuff, there's people working 2, 3 jobs and they got to work to pay their bills and take care of their family and their kids and themselves and pay their mortgages and car payments. So they're doing these 2, 3 jobs and to stimulate themselves to be able to do all that stuff. A lot of people are resorting to maybe doing meth or doing cocaine to stay up and be able to work 12, 13 hours, you know, 2 jobs. You could be working 16 hours in a day or more. So that's where addiction comes in. People get addicted that way. I mean, with an injury like I had with my shoulder injury, you know, there went my football career. I more than likely probably was never going to play football ever again. And where was I going to go now? I was working. I was working at McDonald's, I believe it was. I was working at McDonald's as a cook, and you know, where am I going to go in life? Am I going to work at McDonald's the rest of my life, or am I going to, you know, maybe get a job and become, you know, some CEO of some company? Because I was addicted, I started to get more heavy into the addiction and losing jobs, lost many jobs because of the addiction. You can't go to work because you're dope sick. You can't stay awake because me doing the heroin, I was nodding out at work all the time. And when I say nodding out, you're falling asleep, basically. Employers see that and, oh, we can't have you working here, you know, failed drug test, you know, trying to get a job somewhere else. And you have to take a drug test to get a job and couldn't pass a drug test. Like couldn't get a job, couldn't pay my bills. Became homeless, living anywhere I could lay down at night. I would live in friends' houses and families' houses and parks and everything. A lot of the friends that I was hanging out with at the time, they were, you know, heavy into drugs, criminal street activity. You know, I hung out with friends that I thought were my friends then that were doing illegal activity and selling drugs and everything like that. So I got involved in selling drugs and corner pushing drugs on the corner. You know, somebody stop at the 7-Eleven and, you know, hey, you need a 20? I'd give them a $20 rock of cocaine or some heroin. Living that lifestyle, living day to day, waking up, doing the drugs, selling the drugs, you know, hoping that I wouldn't be arrested, you know, because then you go to jail, prison, everything for drugs. I always wanted to get off the drugs. I always wanted to, but I didn't know how to. And there were moments and times where I had been sober for 6 months, maybe a year, And I was proud that I was sober. And then something might have happened in my life where I lost a job. Well, oh, I don't have a job now, so I'm depressed. And you know, drug addiction causes depression. So here I am now. Don't have a job. My rent's due. I'm gonna get evicted from my apartment. My girlfriend left me, or my wife left me, and uh, um, you resort back to trying to cover up that pain of losing all of that you worked so hard for. You know, I was sober for a year, and I worked hard to become sober and have a nice place to live and nice things, and then I'm losing it all because I got laid off or stuff like that. So you resort back to doing the drugs again. You resort back to doing cocaine and heroin. There were many times that I had gotten sober, and um, once I'd gotten sober for a while, then I thought in my mind, well, yeah, I could do a little bit here on the side. Maybe on the weekend, I could, do $20 or $30 worth of cocaine. I'm okay with that. I can do that. And I couldn't just do $20 or $30 on the weekend. I'd wind up doing hundreds of dollars on a weekend. Basically blow a whole paycheck on drugs, and then go to try to pay a bill, or your rent's due and you couldn't pay your bill. You couldn't feed yourself because you had no money. The moment I really needed to quit, it was 7/9 of 2009. I was basically at my point of almost 25 years of addiction. I just didn't want to be addicted no more. I didn't want to live that life. I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to not have a job. I didn't want to not have my family around. Everybody had wanted nothing to do with me. My parents, uh, my sister, my brothers. They wanted nothing to do with me because I was addicted, and I wanted to get off them drugs. And I was married at the time. I think I just had a moment in my life where I'm either gonna quit doing these drugs, or uh, what, I'm just gonna overdose. I'm gonna die. And I attempted suicide. And in the event of attempting the suicide, I basically, the police came. My wife had called the police and said that he's acting strange. He's talking about killing himself, this and that. So of course, I lived in a small city outside of Goshen in Warsaw, Indiana, and city police and county, they all show up, and here I am threatening to kill myself, and the police are trying to talk me out of doing that because that's their job. They don't want to, witness somebody doing that. They don't want to see somebody doing that, and they're trying to talk me out of it. Please, let's get you some help. It's not worth it. You got a wife here, da 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 da, this and that. And I just told the police, I said, well, you're either going to kill me or I'm going to kill you. And that was the wrong thing to say. And thankfully, I'm still here today because of that, because they wound up tasing me and taking me into custody and taking me to jail. And I was so out of it, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that I had done that till the next morning when I literally woke up in a jail cell, and I didn't know what was going on. All I know is that I'm in jail. I didn't know what I had done, why I was there. And I asked an officer that was walking by the cell, because they had me up front because I was so high and on whatever, they didn't know what I was on. But I was so high, that's why they put me up there to observe me. And I asked one of the officers, what had I done, and what is my bond? I need to get out of here. And he's like, well, your bond is pretty high right now. You threatened to kill police officers. I didn't know I didn't know what was about to happen. I didn't know where I was going to go in life. All I know is that I was in jail. I was addicted. I had lost everything in my life. And I knew I needed help. I just didn't know how to get that help. And the officer that was standing there at my cell door, he said, he looked at me and he said, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And I said, "Yeah, I believe in Jesus." Um, and he said, "Then I suggest you go over there and you sit on your bunk and you talk to Jesus and you ask Jesus to forgive you." And I just like, okay, yeah, I'll try that. And I literally went and sat down in my bed there in my cell, and I asked Jesus to please forgive me for my sins, and cure me of this addiction that I have. 17 years ago, I would have told myself, "What are you doing? Why? Why are you doing this?" And here I am. I'm sitting in this jail cell, not knowing what's going on. What am I charged with? What's going to happen? All I know is that I'm kind of sober. I guess you can say I'm kind of sober. I might probably still have that drug in me coming down off of it, I guess you can say. Um, and I don't know what's going on. And I finally get the guards to allow me to make a phone call. And I call my wife and I said, I don't know what I did, but my bond's pretty high. I think my bond at the time was like $50,000 cash. I didn't have $50,000, and I'm crying to her, and you need to get me out of here. Da 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 da. And she's like, no, I don't have the money. You're just gonna have to stay there and go to court, and maybe they'll reduce your bond, or maybe they'll OR you. And all I can think of was I'm gonna be here for a while. And I go to court for my initial hearing, and the judge keeps my bond at $50,000. And the judge sets me a court date for 30 days. Do you need a lawyer? Well, yeah, I need a lawyer. I don't. Do you have a job? No, I don't have a job. Where do you live? Gave him my address. Well, we'll appoint you a court appointed attorney. Um, and all I could think of is that, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm an addict. I've been an addict for 25 years now. I need to get off of this stuff. I got to do something. So if this is what it's gonna take, is for me to go to jail, possibly prison, and get sober, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna stand 10 toes down, and I'm gonna stand with my head held high, and I'm gonna get the help that I needed. And I think I spent, I think it was about 8 months in the county jail, court hearings, this and that, trying to get my bond reduced. Every time I went to court, I kept trying to get it reduced. Can I get it reduced? Can I get it reduced? Judge was like, no. And while I was incarcerated, I started going through drug counseling, getting my education. I didn't have a high school diploma. I had no college degree, nothing. Other inmates were like, well, if you go to this class or that class, it might help you when you go to get sentenced for your case. The judge will look at that as you're trying to do something with your life, and maybe he'll be lenient with you. So I enrolled in GED classes, started getting my GED, reading the Bible, went to Bible classes and drug classes, GED classes, and all I can think of, okay, this is what I'm going to do. If this is going to give me a lighter sentence, I'm going to do all this. It's going to help me. It's going to help me not go to prison for the rest of my life. I'm not going to go to prison the rest of my life, but that's what I was thinking. I'm going to go to prison the rest of my life for what I did. And I kept talking to the lawyer, and he kept coming to me, and, well, this is what they want to offer you. They want to offer you 8 years in prison for what you did. And I'm like, really? Are you serious? I don't understand that. I couldn't wrap it into my head that I'm going to go to prison for 8 years for this. I don't understand it. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that offer. And then he came to me and it's okay. They're going to offer you a 4-year deal. It's the best we can do. You can either take that 4 years to go to trial, and if you're convicted, they're going to max your sentence, and you're going to do 4 years. And okay, well, where do I sign? He said, sign right here. And I literally said to my lawyer, I said, give me 2 pens in case the first pen doesn't work. I'm going to sign this. And he says, now that she's finding this, he says, I can go back to the judge and the prosecutor, and we can get you back into court, and uh, we can see if we can get your bond reduced now because you signed this plea agreement. You're agreeing to plead guilty to this crime, so maybe they'll, give you a bond now. So I go to court and plead guilty to this, and the judge says, okay, we're gonna reschedule the sentencing for 90 days. You have 90 days. So come back in 90 days. And that's when my lawyer asked the judge to reduce my bond down, so I could, get out and go be with my family before I wind up getting sentenced. And the judge is like, yeah, we'll go ahead and reduce it. And he wound up reducing it down to $5,000 with surety. And I think it was like 500. I think it was $500 my wife came up with. And I got out and stayed sober. I stayed sober. I didn't want to go back to doing drugs. I'd already been sitting in jail for like 8 months. I didn't want to do them drugs no more. And I knew that if I did drugs again, then when I went back into court, it wouldn't look good. So I didn't. And then I get sentenced, and the judge sentences me on a 4-year deal. He sentences me to 2 years, Indiana Department of Corrections, with 8 months credit, which meant I had to do I wound up going downstate to Department of Corrections in Indiana for, I think it was about 12 months. And while I was incarcerated in prison, I'm in classes. Again, I'm trying to get my GED. I'm trying to finish my GED. Classes for drug, anger management, mental health classes, anything that I could possibly do to help me out, because that's what I wanted. I wanted to help. I just didn't know how to. So this is my way of getting the help, was being incarcerated, doing these classes to learn about myself, learn about me. Why am I doing the drugs that I'm doing? I don't want to do them, but I got to figure out why I'm doing them. What's causing me to do the drugs that I'm doing? So I did that. I spent, 12 months of, this new sober life that I was living, learning anything and everything about me. I dove deep into why I was angry, why I was depressed. I was angry at the world. I was angry at my parents. I knew right from wrong, but I got to fix that. I got to fix me, myself. I'm not going to sit here and blame my mom, my dad, my employers. That's not what I want to do. I want to fix me as a person and not do drugs again. So I basically spent those 12 months doing that, figuring out where, why, how, how can I better myself? And then I get out. I get out of prison, and I was on very strict probation. They gave me 4 years probation to do after I got released. So I was on a strict probation where I had to report to probation. Every Friday I had to report. They came to my house and, checked on me, gave me drug tests and breathalyzers. It could be 2:00 in the morning and not come to the door. And it's my probation officer with a county sheriff. I'm like, here, we're here to do a drug test on you and breathalyzer. 2:00 in the morning. Surprise, we're here. So I did that. Here I am sober. I'm out of prison. I'm not doing illegal stuff no more. I'm trying to better my life. And my wife is in an active addiction herself. She is in an active addiction while I'm sober. I'm sober, fresh out of prison, and my wife is popping pills left and right to get high. And I just couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand why my wife, knowing that I'm an addict, been to prison, is doing these drugs right in front of me. And I couldn't understand why she's doing this. I did now, 17 years later, now that I'm sober 17 years, I now know she was an addict. She's doing these drugs. And I'm still trying to stay sober. I don't want to fail a drug test. I don't want to go back to prison. I want to continue to stay sober. I want to continue to do good. So I'm going to college because I wound up getting my GED. So I enroll in Indiana Tech University out in Warsaw. Their main campus is in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for business. So I'm going to own my own business someday. That's all I can think of. I was in college. I went to college, night school, college to get this degree. And I leave the college, and I call my wife. I said, "Hey, I'm on my way home. Um, do you need me to stop and get anything for you?" And she's like, "Yeah, stop and get me a pack of cigarettes and a Mountain Dew." So I stop at the convenience store. I get this pop and pack of cigarettes, and I go home. And I walk in the door, and her daughter is sitting on the couch, and her daughter's husband's there, and their kids, our grandkids, running around the living room. And I was like, "Where's your mom?" And she's like, she's in the bedroom. She's laying down. So I went back there and found my wife dead. My wife, who I've got right here on my arm, her name's Bonnie. She died of an overdose, and that was very, very hard. It was very hard because I had been sober a little over a year, not a little longer than that. I think it's 8 months in the county and a year in prison, so 18 months. So 18 months sober, and here I'm finding my wife dead from an overdose, and the only thing I can think of was I'm gonna go get high. I want to get high.
And so, how were you able to, like, did you go get high?
I didn't.
You didn't, right? Because you
I stayed
stayed
sober.
sober. And so, how were you able to overcome that? That's such a difficult situation, you know? You're over here trying to run away from an addiction.
I did not want to go back to that lifestyle. My mom was close to passing away. She had gotten real sick. She'd gotten what they call renal failure. All of her organs were shutting down from her addiction of alcohol. Her whole life, she was an alcoholic drinker. And I remember going to my mom's nursing home to see her. And I remember sitting next to her in her bed and holding her hand. And she said, "Son, I love you. Um, Always remember, no matter what you do in life, I love you." Um, and I said, "I love you too, Mom." And she says, "You just got to make me a promise. You have to promise me that you're never going to go back to that life." And I promised my mother. I promised my mother I would never go back to doing drugs. Sorry.
Sorry, brother.
I promised my mother I would not go back to doing drugs. I did not want to live that life no more. As a child, you look up to your parents. You look up to your parents. Your parents are your role models. Supposed to be your role models. They teach you everything. They teach you how to walk, eat, use the bathroom, education. Um, they teach you how to be a man in life, or a girl. You know, if you're a girl, they teach you how to do all that stuff. Teach you how to be responsible. Teach you right from wrong. And all I could think of that day was that I promise you, Mom, I won't. I'll never go back to that. And she said, "I know you won't." And I remember that day. I'll never forget that day when my mom said that. She said, "I know you won't." It's like my mom knew. So I stayed sober, going on 17 years sober. I've experienced the loss of a wife, my mother, and then this October will be 2 years that my son passed away. Losing my wife was hard. Losing my mother was harder. But losing my son, that's been the hardest thing I've had to deal with in 17 years. Thankfully, because of loved ones around me, my beautiful wife that I have now sitting at home, and the support that I have around me and a clearer head that I have now that I didn't have when I started doing drugs when I was 13, 14 years old. I have a different mind frame now. I've been able to stay sober through that, and it's not been easy. This past 2 years, it's been pretty hard because you get your kids' memories. You have your memories of them, hey, dad, and not being able to hold your child and hug them and hear them cry and yell at them. You see things around your house that remind you of them. My son was a big Keach Lego fan, so I have a tattoo on my back with his name, and it says Kevin. I'm still finding Legos today. It's been hard, but like I said, my mind frame is different now than what it was when I was in active addiction. I've been able to stay sober through it. My biggest message now is never be afraid to ask for help. Don't ever be afraid to ask someone for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and never be ashamed of what you've done. I've done bad things in my life. I'm ashamed of those things that I did, but I'm proud of who I am now and where I'm at in my life now. If you have that addiction, just ask somebody for help. My loved ones now, they're proud of me. I lost many friends and loved ones, and I've gained thousands of friends and loved ones. I've got loved ones back in my life. My oldest son lives in South Bend, and he wanted nothing to do with me because I was active in addiction, and we regularly talk to each other, we call each other, we text each other. It's the ability to be sober and people to be proud of me for overcoming that. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I've gone through what I've gone through in my life to put me where I'm at in my life. I'm thankful that I went through all of that because it made me a better person. It made me a better man. To be able to talk with you and anybody else about what I've gone through in life. I literally have talked to people before, and they were like, it's amazing. You should be proud of yourself for that. And that's one of the reasons I reached out to you about this, is that I want people. I'm not trying to glorify addiction. I'm not trying to glorify myself. I'm doing it because there's people out there that are going through exactly what I've gone through in my life, and they're in that state right now where they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do, where to go. So that's why I'm doing this, is to let everybody out there know that there is a different way. There's a better life. Um, it's way better than what it was.
Has there been any like online resources that, because look, obviously back then, like 17 years ago, you would,
Yeah.
have you seen anything now? Or have you thought about creating anything?
I've had cravings. Yeah, I've had cravings. When my son passed away, that was the hardest point in my addiction, in my recovery, was dealing with that, and dealing with how do you deal with the loss of a child.
Right.
Your parents, you pass away, they're older. Yeah, it hurts to lose them, but your child, you lose your child. It's one of the most hardest things I think that anybody could ever go through in life, is losing a child. And the thought of using those drugs again, it crossed my mind. Yeah, but it also, in my mind, I can't do that. I can't do that because where's it going to lead me? How doing them drugs is it going to change anything? It's not going to change nothing. I'm still going to not have a son. But repercussions of doing them drugs again, I could lose 2 jobs that I have, my house, my beautiful wife that's sitting at home right now. I could lose all of that just doing them drugs. And I can't see myself doing it. So that's why I've stayed strong, sober, and I'm here today. Hashtag heroin sucks. Hashtag never give up.